Hey guys, how are you doing? Frank Cox here, the barbecue pit engineer. I always forget I can go live on YouTube, so decided to jump in here today. If you're watching this on the recording, future tense, I guess. Today is Saturday, and I don't know what time it is. It's early afternoon, February 4th, I believe. I'm here in the shop today working on some cooker stuff, and decided while I was here that I would go live real quick. I did this on Instagram the other day, and it was about 40 minutes long. It was one of the longest lives I've ever done on Instagram anyway. And but basically what spurred all this is I wanted to go live, and hey, if you're on here, let me see if I can watch the chat too. I don't know if I can or not. I'd sure like to watch the chat. Here we go. Anyway, I'm watching the chat down there. If you've got questions while we're going, I'll go back through them once I get done with the topic I'm going to talk about. But would love to answer any questions you got about building smokers or just general fabrication or anything like that, even pit mastery, running pits and stuff. Hey guys, how you doing? And but I'm going to start off this. This is a technical question that I get regularly in emails and stuff like that from people that are looking for help with designing their smoker or buying a set of plans or something like that. And I did this live, like I said, on Instagram the other day. Decided to go ahead and do it again. I need to practice, and we'll do it here on YouTube. So appreciate you guys watching there. We'll get right into it. So basically what it amounts to is whenever we get questions from people about a tank, they almost always tell us the gallons number. And while it's important to know the gallons for like volume, like for sizing, that's not the most important piece of information. We actually need to know the diameter and the length, and here's why. So not all tanks are created equal. 250 gallon propane tank, for instance, is one of the most common tanks that people ask about. And they're usually, the gallons number is almost slang, really. It's not actually the gallons number typically. Sometimes it could be more or less. And for instance, they'll say, I have a 250 gallon tank. Now that could be 30 inches diameter and 94 inches long with the deep hemispherical ends, which is a pretty common tank. Or it could be the most popular tank, which is 30 inches diameter and like 87 long with the elliptical heads. So we're going to go into a little bit of terminology there and just kind of define some of that stuff, and then talk a little bit of really basic geometry. You probably already know some of this information, but for those guys out there that don't know it, we're going to bring it full circle for you. So anyway, so we're going to get into that. So the difference in propane tanks as far as what we call a head, or it's also called an end bell. Some people will call it that. So there's different depths, basically, and shapes is the main part of it. Of course, there's a flat head, which is just a flat piece of plate on the end of a cylinder, like an oil tank. But we're mostly talking about propane tanks here. Propane tanks typically, in some water tanks, will have elliptical shaped heads or hemispherical heads. Elliptical just means, if you're ever looking at an ellipse, it's kind of an egg, really is what it is. And then we're only using half of that, and we're putting it on each end. So elliptical would be a half ellipse. And that elliptical head is one of my favorite kinds of heads to work with. Just for some reason, I always felt them really deep heads, the hemispherical kind, which are like about 20 inches deep typically. I just felt those were a lot of wasted space on a pit, you know. For length and weight and unusable cooking space sometimes. So I always preferred to go with the elliptical head. So once again, there for guys just jumping in, ellipse is like an egg shape, and we're cutting it in half, horizontally, and then we're using that one half, and that's what's called an elliptical head. A head there again is the end caps on any kind of a tank or vessel. Could be flat, could be elliptical, and then there's the other kind, hemispherical. So hemispherical is just like what they say, the northern and southern hemisphere on the globe. Basically, it's a circle, it's a sphere, but it's half, hemi. So we're looking at cutting a ball in half, and that's one end of a head. like I just said a minute ago, those are, I don't really like those typically because they're so deep and I feel like they're a waste of space. But on bigger tanks, typically you can't get away from it. A lot of that has to do with stress relief and structure of the vessel, why they choose one over the other. You know, different companies prefer different ones, I guess. So that's that. Now, when it comes, like I said, we don't really want to go by gallons. Like when you're looking at dimensions or designing a pit, you're going to have to know like some information like the diameter. So that's going to be not, so there's two different terms that get confused a lot by people that don't use them every day. There's diameter, which is the straight across a circle. So you got a circle and diameter is straight across it. Circumference is the distance around the perimeter of that tank. And so what that amounts to is that you can tell me either number. I just need to know that you're calling it the right thing. And then I can help you with that. Why does that matter? Okay, well, when it comes to design, if that diameter is off like 2 inches, right? If you say 30 and it winds up being 32 or something like that, that does have a huge impact in the overall volume. Now, it might look like a 250 and feel like a 250, but if we wrap that circumference tape measure around it and we get that outside diameter, then we can do the formula for that. I think it's pi divided by diameter pi or vice versa, you know. So anyway, you wrap that around, that tape measure around there, and then we can do the math and we can tell you exactly to the letter what the outside diameter of that tank is. You can do it on the inside also. I guess my battery's going dead on the phone here. You can do it on the inside also if you have a way of measuring it. So then we're also going to talk about how to measure the length of that tank. So diameter, like we said, once again, is straight across. Circumference is around. Now we're going to go back to our heads, and we're going to go from the dead center, farthest side out, called tip to tip, right? And you're going to get that length. And there's really not a good way to measure that except like using a T-square or some kind of a deal like that, where you can lay it along one edge of the tank, get it kind of close to the dead center of the head, and then you can bump off that T-square and move over to a weld seam, write that number down, go from weld seam to weld seam, write that down, measure the other head, you know. Add it all up and that's your length tip to tip. That's usually the easiest way when you have limited tools. So now we know the overall length and we know the actual diameter. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just calculate the volume of that vessel, and then I'll actually transpose that into gallons. And a lot of times it could be 10, 20% different than what we thought, you know. So when we're figuring a firebox, and we're like for reverse flows, it matters. The way we design a reverse flow, we want to thread the needle. We want it to be really, really right. So in that situation, you wind up with, you know, the gallons could be off 20%, which will affect your firebox by this much. It's a huge number sometimes. So we want to be as accurate as possible on that. By the way, I'm not seeing any chat. If you guys have any chat, any questions you'd like to pop down in there before the phone dies on me here, I'd sure like to answer some questions for you. So anyway, we're going to measure length by tip to tip, and then we're going to measure the diameter, and that's the numbers we're going to need. So then we can actually take it to the calculator, and we can start with our firebox dimensions. And what I'm going to do is I'm typically going to match the diameter to the width of my firebox, looking at the firebox door, if that's on the end, the long end of the tank. So that's kind of where that plays. And then typically on the calculator, when I'm running it, I'm going to use that width twice. I'm going to do that length and width, and then I'm going to be like somewhere around 24 inches for the height to start. What up, Mr. Voigt? Glad you checked in, buddy. So anyway, hey, Mr. Voigt's starting a YouTube channel on here too. You should follow him over there for a lot of cool stuff like this year. So anyway, so we're taking into consideration the gallons. We're using the diameter as the width of our firebox and the depth. And then, like I say, I typically use about a 24-inch to 30-inch height for my firebox. What I've found is that if I go much taller than 24 and I want to stand on the ground and cook on that cooker, my cooking grate height, depending on where the firebox is mounted on the end of the cooker, my cooking grade height will be higher than 36 inches off the ground on a big tank. And that's kind of a deal breaker for me. I don't like to reach up. I've got shoulder problems, one of those slap tear things that sucks. And then lifting up like this with a brisket, after, you know, full pit of briskets can suck. So anyway, guys, anybody got any questions about all that there? I see Mr. Voigt's chat there, so I know it's working. Give you here just a minute. We also talked a little bit about insulating fireboxes and stuff, and I just did a podcast on there. There's the last few videos I published were audio only, just with a video like a sound wave thing going. That's our podcast on iTunes and Spotify and different places like that. I started posting on there again because I can do it while I'm driving, and it's super, super easy for me to cram a bunch of content in. But I did one about how thick of material you need to use, and then I did another one about insulation for your fireboxes and stuff like that. And you can go backwards on this platform. I don't have all the podcast episodes, but I do have quite a few. If you go to iTunes or Spotify, whatever, you can pick them all up over there. All the way back a couple, 3 years now. I think 3 or 4 years I've been doing it. So here we go, digging it. I have a perfect size tank that can't yet determine what it is made of. Hang on, I'm trying to get it to stay alive. Can't yet determine what it is made of. It doesn't rust. It's slightly magnetic, and the tag, as far as I can tell, doesn't state the composition of the tank. So if it's a propane tank, I'll tell you right now it's not galvanized, because propane and galvanization of any kind are reactive. Actually, propane will eat through the steel if you use galvanized pipe, and so you'll never see a galvanized gas line, at least that I know of. If they can't use steel for whatever reason, like in the ocean or something like that, they'll switch over to poly or stainless, and or copper even sometimes. I don't like seeing gas lines in copper, but I've seen quite a few even brazed in houses, like silver soldered together. So that's not cool. But okay, so he says it's an air holding tank. So in this case, it is possible that it is galvanized. Really, the only way to really tell if it's galvanized is just heat up a little area of it and look and see like if the little poofy fluffies come up off of it, you know. Don't breathe it in, it's bad for you. You know, or you can just heat it with a torch or run a little MIG weld bead on it. MIG welder will be really, really bright blue. It won't be like a normal bright MIG weld if you're welding on it. That's about the only way I know to tell if it's galvanized or not. Daniel Dunn, my brother, how you doing? He says, I've been given a 24-inch diameter by 30-inch long propane tank. What's the best use for it? I've got a reverse flow. Can an offset be built? Absolutely, man. If you look at, we've actually got plans for, I think, let's see, 24 by 30. I'm not really sure I've got a plan for that, but that would make a nice little backyard offset. I mean, it's not long, but it's pretty cool. I'd still build something. I built my first reverse flow was actually, my first real reverse flow was actually one of those little air tanks that you throw in the back of your truck. I used 2 of those to build it out of, and that was a pretty cool build. That cooker's still around here somewhere. I don't know where it's at. Let's see. Digging It says, yeah, that's what I was thinking. I could use MIG with a tri-mix in case it's stainless. Yeah, I don't know that it'll be stainless. You'll be able to, you know, another way you can calculate that is you can weigh it. Because if you take the weight and you know the wall thickness, which will be on the tag, the wall thickness, you can actually weigh it, and then you can measure the surface area if you're pretty good with a tape measure and some numbers. And you can calculate what it should weigh about if it's stainless. And stainless will be a lot heavier than steel of the same thickness. So, but I would bet, I don't know, man, it's a toss-up in there. All right, guys, well, hey, I'm going to jump off of here because my phone is flashing a little beeper beep at me. I tell you what, if you haven't already, oh, he says, wait, okay, what if galvanized? Can it still be used? Galvanized, I don't recommend it. Galvanized will off-gas it when you heat it with anything. Now, truth be told, ovens in your house have galvanized sheet metal in them. If you pull them apart enough, even the burners and stuff like that, are typically stamped out of galvanized steel and were not dead. So I just wouldn't, honestly. There's even like heat exchangers and furnaces and all kinds of stuff that are made out of galvanized that are heated with a gas flame, you know, and that's super hot. So, but I wouldn't necessarily make a food cooker out of that myself. Yeah, cool. Okay. Well, anyway, guys, yeah, I'm going to jump off here. If you haven't already, hop over to SmokerBuilderU.com and join up. It's free to join. No strings attached. It's just a community full of guys like us that talk about things like this. And I'm doing a lot more, you know, personal posting in there. I can keep up in there a lot better. It's harder to publish videos. That's why I have to go live now. So there just ain't enough Frank to go around. So anyway, guys, I appreciate you. Till next time, keep your smoke thin and blue, and take it easy. We'll see you later.